Every business has to comply with its obligation to pay tax. Let's look at the basic compliance obligations Georgia needs to be aware of so she can manage this aspect of her business from day one.
As a business, what tax returns do I need to lodge?
Well, if you set up your business as a sole trader, then there's no separate income tax return that you need to lodge. It's just an extra business schedule that goes in with your normal personal tax return. That's once a year. If you set up a separate structure to run your business, like a company or a trust, then that company or trust would lodge its own tax return. Most new businesses and continuing businesses would need to lodge a business activity statement as well, or a BAS. So if you're registered for GST, that goes on your BAS. If you pay employees, that goes on your BAS. If you pay tax installments, they go on your BAS. And all those sorts of things go in together on just one BAS that gets lodged usually every few months.
How often do I need to prepare them?
So for your income tax return, that's just once a year. Every 30 June financial year, there's a separate annual tax return. BASs, you can choose to lodge them once a year if you meet certain criteria and if you're generally for new businesses, but we wouldn't normally recommend that. It's important to get these things dealt with and budgeted regularly right from the get-go. So with your GST and all those sorts of obligations, and so we would normally recommend that people go on a quarterly basis right from the start, so they're lodging their BAS every few months.
What about payment of tax? When does this occur?
Well, as a client of Nexia, you would have access to extended due dates, which are available to registered tax agents. That applies for lodgement and payment. So if we're talking about income tax returns, usually it's the same for your personal return or your business return. You get about 10 months from the end of the 30 June financial year. It's 15th of May is the deadline in that case. So of course we would sort these things out much sooner than 10 months, so you can effectively plan for any payments or refunds that might be due. For your BASs, that is usually 28 days after the end of the quarter. And if you lodge with a tax agent, you get an extra 28 days on top of that for lodgement and payment. So if we're sitting down to do your 31st of March quarter BAS, normally that wouldn't be due until the 25th of May or thereabouts. It's important to sit down regularly and meet up to discuss things, and this should be one of the main items on the agenda. You need to plan for your tax and your GST obligations right from the start. And so depending on how good you are at saving and how strict you want to be, you've got some options in terms of setting aside the cash for this. You may want to actually set up a separate bank account, a separate saving account, and put the tax and GST into there on a monthly basis. Or you could even pay it across to the ATO account and it will sit there as a credit for when those obligations are due.
As a startup, it is important to understand your reporting and lodgement requirements. Good habits at the outset will set you up well as your business gets going. Putting money aside to cover your tax as it falls due will ensure there are no surprises down the track.